So, to celebrate moving on up into my new pad, I decided to catch a lazy Sunday afternoon matinee and see Nobody, directed by Ilya Naishuller and starring Bob Odenkirk, Connie Nielsen, and Christopher Lloyd. And it was really something. We open to a bloodied and battered man in police custody, a cigarette in one cuffed hand and an adorable kitten in the other. Who is he, the detectives ask. Smash cut to title, and we learn. Hutch Mansell, unassuming family man. Week after week, Hutch pushes pencils at an auto shop run by his in-laws, while at home he's physically and emotionally distant from his well-to-do wife. Then, one night, a pair of burglars break into the house. Hutch grabs a golf club, but instead of going funny games on the intruders, he chickens out, letting them pummel his teenage son before just saying to take some cash and go. This incident, and the resultant suburban gossip, only widens the rift of his family. He seeks comfort instead from an unseen friend, speaking over a mysterious ham radio, and in his father, an ex-cop resigned to assisted living. When he learns his daughter's kitty cat bracelet went missing in the wake of the robbery, though, he arms himself to track down the crooks. What he finds instead, though, is a busload of drunken thugs whom he ruthlessly subdues in a burst of displaced aggression. Only thing is, one of the casualties was the brother of a local mob boss. And from there, it becomes an all-out war between a psychotic crime lord and a one-man army, as Hutch must protect what's his from the fallout of his actions and inactions by tapping back into a particular set of skills which prove that being a government auditor in his youth didn't just mean desk work. Right off the bat, this movie works because it's both surprising and yet a sublime example of what you see being what you get. From the sketch comedy goofball of Mr. Show to a tragic ambulance chaser in Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, all the way to a genial father figure in Little Women and Undone, Bob Odenkirk is a man who needs no introduction, and yet who laudably reinvents his cinematic persona every decade. This time around, he tackles a subgenre undergoing something of a renaissance in recent years. The story of a dad on a quest for vengeance when his loved ones and/or masculinity are threatened. It's a durable, if not enduringly controversial setup from Death Wish to Death Sentence to Liam Neeson's entire filmography since my sophomore year. Also, Joe Somebody, I think? Indeed, incongruous casting is one of the film's major strengths. When Bruce Willis plays a wronged everyman turned vigilante, for example, it rings a little hollow after 3 decades of seeing him jump off more skyscrapers than most people ever enter. Odenkirk's character reveals himself to be just as much of a paternal powerhouse as the protagonists of those other dad action franchises, but the actor's nervous energy and slight build allow him to credibly convey the act of cowardice which sets events in motion, as well as numerous moments of conflicted reflection throughout. The montage, which illustrates Hutch's domestic doldrums, missing the garbage truck, sipping coffee, waiting for the bus, feeling emasculated by a neighbor's classic car, is pretty standard, but Odenkirk sells it just as well. Regardless, comparisons to another fictional hitter with a comedic streak are unavoidable. Hutch is essentially a blue-collar John Wick, trading bespoke fashions for rumpled denim, but otherwise keeping the crucial traits. A regression to top-tier assassination skills when a loved one is threatened, a stash of gold in his basement, even picking up a furry friend for company. However, far from Wick's ponderous mythology and grim, gritty tenor of series like Taken and The Equalizer, Nobody is a grisly action flick that's willing to have a little fun with itself. This simple tonal tweak reinvigorates the formula. There's plenty of tension, but it's also leavened by moments like, say, a Vietnam vet who recognizes Hutch slamming an absurd number of locks on his way out of a room. There's also a running bit where Hutch's conversation with a battered baddie is cut short when he realizes his audience expired mid-anecdote. Another source of humor is the film's soundtrack, replete with dissonant song choices in a way which recalls Deadpool and other contemporary hard R action comedies. The gag admittedly gets a bit stale, especially in conjunction with slow-mo sequences that feel like they're killing time as much as dead meats, but I'd be lying if I said I'd pass up a copy of his soundtrack. Despite all these irreverent touches, though, it wouldn't be fair to call the film a parody per se. Rather, it's a sincere contender for their ranks, just one with a lot of jokes and a willingness to get gruesomely silly for every other fatality. To that end, the combat choreography is brutal but not flashy, especially in the much-touted and delightfully prolonged bus brawl centerpiece. There's no shortage of gleeful creativity in the kills, from Hutch impaling a goon with a kettle to a man getting caught in what I can only describe as a barbed wire trebuchet. Stunt doubles and charitable editing are in fact across the board, of course, but Naishuller is a perfect fit to oversee this kind of goofy, bloody, anything-goes blowout. Like in the director's preceding effort, Hardcore Henry, we've got guns, knives, bats, fistfights, car chases. It's the package deal, and that package is a claymore. The film's willful excess also informs some of the subtler left turns in Nobody, such as when a bloodied Hutch, thrown through a window, just re-enters the premises and gets back to kicking ass. In a perfect world, this is the kind of movie that someone can go into totally blind and lose their minds when Jimmy McGill turns out to be a Black Ops master. As it stands, though, the first act feels as top-heavy as a Disney mascot for how it teases out Hutch revealing his power level. After that, we get a confrontation on public transportation, a trip to a shady nightclub, a badass monologue or two, a retreat to a labyrinthine warehouse for the final stand. The when, where, and why of this plot paints by numbers even more than it paints the walls in blood. The main villain is intimidating enough. He's a song and dance man, but also liable to use a broken cocktail glass as brass knuckles if someone questions his authority. But he's not terribly memorable. Just another crazy rusky gangster in a gaudy suit, an archetype which even having a literal black Russian as his number 2 doesn't spice up. What passes for a MacGuffin is kind of a non-starter as well. The Obshank, as it's called, some kind of mobster nest egg, shows up so briefly and substantively means so little that I kept thinking it was called the Odradek or the Odenkirk. Or a Love Shack. Thematically, too, the film fumbles its protagonist's motivations in the process of towing that tightrope between subversion and homage. That the presumptive targets of his initial id are more morally complex than it first seemed is something that nobody's promotional materials skirt around, but this gentle twist is inconsequential when the inciting incident literally crashes into the next scene. Hutch becomes a gun-toting, knife-wielding commando less in a moment of need and more just to let off some steam. Likewise, for as critical as we're told his wife and children are, they're largely motivational props without much personal development or consequential reactions to his decisions. It's not even clear how much Miss Mansell knows about her husband's past. Her alarm at his escalating displays of violence suggests nothing, but as she patches him up following an earlier scuffle, he remarks that it's just like the old times and asks if she remembers who we used to be. Granted, a happy nuclear family and alpha papa status are kind of interchangeable in movies like this, so whether it's his whole life or just his midlife that's facing a crisis is beside the point. All this being said, the final act is a joyful mess of miscellaneous mayhem. It's impossible to clarify what makes the climax so great without getting into spoilers, so let's just say that the short answer is... And the longer answer is Christopher Lloyd packing heat. Despite playing a comedically elderly man half a decade before I was born, Lloyd's earnest smirk and expressive brow have lost none of their potency, and it is a rapturous delight to see him cracking wise as he blows bad guys away with a shotgun. In turn, RZA plays Hutch's brother from another mother and proves Wu-Tang Clan's legendary warning beyond a shadow of a doubt when he snipes 3 goons simultaneously at point-blank range, a silver PlayStation trophy if there ever was one. Alright, other spoilery stray thoughts. As the in media res opening immediately confirms, Hutch's cat gets out alright, but knowing it was in the vents that whole time when the final battle happens, that little thing must have been on the last of its 9 lives. Hutch gives a fallen foe a tracheotomy with a soda straw at one point, an emergency medical procedure pioneered by Dr. Pepper MD. The main antagonist's introduction is heralded by a title card, but since the only other one of these is for the movie's name, I thought for a few minutes it was a place and not a person. Maybe that scene transition just confused test audiences and they decided to patch it over with a nod to Suicide Squad. The Pentagon file on Hutch has its cover page redacted save for the word nobody, which skirts that great line between funny and cool, but also raises the question of what else the text could have possibly said. Hutch burns down his house to herald the third act, which makes some sense as a practical and metaphorical way to destroy his past, but really seems like something that his family would have a problem with after he just ushered them off to a secondary location. One particular link between this film and The Equalizer is that both have an R-rated Home Alone finale set in a hardware facility. I imagine this is becoming a trope because it's the best way to show off a variety of kills in an environment that male moviegoers will likely know their way around. Still, it kind of comes across as a dumping ground for the very random, specific kill concepts that didn't make the cut for elsewhere in the script. And I have a strong suspicion that they would have gone with the title Mr. Nobody instead, but some other joker got there first. Overall, I'd give this film a 7.5 out of 10. The overall story has been done to death, but Odenkirk in the lead, with his alternately meek and stoic demeanor, is such a novelty that every cliché feels a little fresher by association. The action scenes are well structured, clever, and satisfying, and there's some good laughs along the way. It's not high art, but it's got Doc Brown with a boomstick, and that's about all I need on a weekend. But if you want to keep your own body from taking a beating, remember to take COVID into consideration before visiting the theater. This particular picture wasn't among the growing slate of releases sent straight to VOD in 2021, so fortunately I had no excuse to not see it on the big screen. And it's definitely the kind of production that benefits from that environment, what with all the booms and bangs and other auditory overkill that reminds me to remind you to also cover your ears in addition to your nose and mouth. With Godzilla vs. Kong now playing, the film showtimes may well get crowded out by an even more blockbusting spectacle. But in any event, just keep your distance in the concessions line and in the seats. Even if you can't sit next to somebody, it's still worth going by your lonesome to see nobody.